The thunder of hooves against dry earth was the first sound Beatrice Winslow heard when she came back to consciousness, her body aching and her vision blurred as she tried to piece together what had happened. The stagecoach, yes. She remembered boarding in Kansas City, bound for Nevada territory. Now it lay splintered and broken around her, the once sturdy vehicle reduced to kindling by whatever calamity had befallen them. Beatrice attempted to move, only to find her legs pinned beneath a section of the coach's frame. Pain shot through her body, and she stifled a cry, dust coating her throat. The relentless sun beat down upon her face as she struggled, her traveling dress torn and soiled with the red dirt of the trail. The hoofbeats grew louder, and through squinted eyes, she saw a silhouette against the harsh sunlight, a man on horseback approaching at a gallop. Her heart raced with both hope and fear. In these untamed lands, one could never be certain if an approaching stranger brought salvation or further peril. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jangling as his boots hit the ground. His face was obscured by the shadow cast by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could see he wore the rugged attire of a cowboy, worn leather chaps over denim pants, a cotton shirt with a bandana at his neck, and a gun belt slung low on his hips. "Don't move, madam." His voice was deep yet gentle as he assessed the wreckage. "You're hurt." "The others," Beatrice managed to whisper, remembering the banker from St. Louis, the elderly couple headed to visit their son and the driver. "Are they?" The cowboy's silence was answer enough. He knelt beside her, careful hands examining the debris that trapped her. His face came into view then, weathered by sun and wind, but handsome, with kind eyes the color of a summer sky and a strong jawline shadowed with stubble. He couldn't have been more than 30 years of age. "I'm going to get you out of here," he assured her, his expression grim but determined as he began to shift the wooden beams that pinned her legs. With methodical strength, he lifted the heaviest piece of the wreckage, allowing Beatrice to slide free. Pain coursed through her limbs as circulation returned, but nothing felt broken, a miracle considering the state of the stagecoach. As he carefully lifted her into his arms, she caught sight of the other passengers, still and silent among the scattered luggage and broken wood. Tears welled in her eyes. The cowboy followed her gaze. "Ambush," he said simply. "Road agents. They've been plaguing this stretch for months. You're lucky to be alive." He carried her to his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion that stood patiently nearby. With gentle hands, he helped her into the saddle before mounting behind her, one arm securely around her waist. "Where are you taking me?" Beatrice asked, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. "My ranch," he replied. "It's about an hour's ride from here. You need tending to, and it's not safe to linger." As the horse began to move, the cowboy's arm tightened slightly around her waist, steadying her. His voice was soft but carried a weight of promise that sent a curious shiver down her spine. "The journey ends with me," he whispered, spurring the horse into a canter across the vast, unforgiving landscape of Wyoming territory. 1875. Samuel Ryder had been on his way back from Snake River when he'd spotted the wreckage. The small but growing town served as the closest trading post to his ranch, 20 miles of rough country away from civilization. He'd gone to town for supplies and to send a telegram to his cattle buyer in Cheyenne when fate had placed him on that particular trail at that particular moment. The woman in his arms remained silent as they rode, occasionally trembling from shock or pain, he couldn't be sure which. His ranch house came into view as they crested a hill, a sturdy 2-story structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides and smoke curling from the chimney. Beyond it stood a barn, corral, and bunkhouse, though the latter sat empty these days. "Welcome to Ryder Ranch," Samuel said, slowing his horse as they approached. "It's not much, but it's safe." Beatrice gazed at the homestead, a faint smile touching her lips. "It looks like paradise compared to that stagecoach." Samuel helped her down from the horse, noting how she swayed slightly on her feet before finding her balance. Her dress, once fine but now torn and stained, hinted at her status a lady of means, most likely, not someone accustomed to the harsh realities of frontier life. "I need to send someone to attend to the others," he said, the grim duty weighing on him. "But first, let's get you settled." Inside the house, warmth from the cooking hearth greeted them. Samuel led Beatrice to a chair at the kitchen table before calling out, "Rosa, I need your help." An older Mexican woman emerged from the pantry, her eyes widening at the sight of the injured woman. "Dios mío, what happened?" Stagecoach ambush. "She's the only survivor. Rosa, this is." "Beatrice," the woman supplied, her voice stronger now. "Beatrice Winslow." "Miss Winslow needs tending," Samuel explained. "I've got to ride back to town, inform Sheriff Davis about the attack." Rosa immediately took charge, her maternal instincts kicking in as she helped Beatrice to her feet. "Come, señorita, we'll get you cleaned up and into some fresh clothes." Samuel watched as Rosa led Beatrice toward the stairs, noticing how the younger woman glanced back at him, gratitude and something else, perhaps uncertainty, in her eyes. "You'll be safe here, Miss Winslow," he assured her. "I'll return before nightfall." The ride to Snake River took Samuel less time than usual, his mind racing faster than his horse's hooves against the packed earth. The stagecoach attack marked the third in as many months, each one bloodier than the last. The road agents were growing bolder, and the territory's sparse law enforcement seemed powerless to stop them. Snake River, Wyoming Territory, was little more than a main street lined with essential businesses: a general store, saloon, small hotel, telegraph office, and sheriff's station. It had sprung up where Snake River met the old trading trail, serving the surrounding ranchers and as a way station for those traveling further west. Sheriff Davis was standing outside his office when Samuel rode in, his aging face creasing with concern as the rancher dismounted. "Another attack?" the lawman asked, reading Samuel's expression. 5 miles east of Broken Ridge Pass. 4 dead. 1 survivor, a woman I brought to my ranch." Davis removed his hat, running a weathered hand through thinning gray hair. "Same as before. Valuables taken," Samuel nodded grimly. "Luggage scattered everywhere. They took what they wanted and left the rest." "I'll round up some men to collect the bodies," Davis sighed. "Any idea who your survivor is?" "Beatrice Winslow. Seems to be a lady of quality, though I don't know where she was heading or where she's from." The sheriff nodded. "Once she's recovered some, bring her in. I'll need her statement." He paused, fixing Samuel with a knowing look. "You be careful, Ryder. These aren't ordinary road agents. They're organized, ruthless, and they leave no witnesses usually." The implication hung heavy in the air between them. If the woman had survived, the bandits might come looking to finish what they'd started. "My ranch is isolated," Samuel replied, "and I can handle trouble if it comes knocking." "I don't doubt that," Davis said. "But all the same, keep your rifle close." After arranging for the recovery of the bodies and sending telegrams to notify authorities in Kansas City about the attack, Samuel made one last stop at the general store, purchasing a ready-made dress that he hoped would fit Beatrice. Mrs. Pemberton, the storekeeper's wife, raised an eyebrow at the purchase but asked no questions, a quality Samuel had always appreciated about the woman. By the time he returned to the ranch, dusk was settling over the land, painting the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. The sight that greeted him as he approached the house made him pull his horse to a halt. Beatrice stood on the porch, her hair freed from its earlier arrangement falling in dark waves around her shoulders. She'd been dressed in what appeared to be one of his shirts, the sleeves rolled up several times, and a pair of trousers that Rosa must have modified hastily to fit her smaller frame. Despite the impropriety of the clothing, she carried herself with the grace of a woman accustomed to fine ballrooms. As he dismounted, he caught her watching him, her expression a mixture of wariness and curiosity. The bruise on her forehead had darkened, and a cut on her cheek had been cleaned and dressed, but otherwise, she appeared remarkably unharmed given what she'd endured. "Sheriff's sending men for the others," Samuel said as he approached the porch, package in hand. "They'll be given proper burials in Snake River." Beatrice nodded, her hands clasping together. "Thank you. I still can't believe I'm the only one who survived." "Sometimes fate has strange plans for us," Samuel replied, extending the package toward her. "I brought you something from town. It's not fancy, but it should fit better than my clothes." A hint of color touched her cheeks as she accepted the package. "You're very kind, Mr. Ryder." "I don't know how I'll ever repay such generosity." "Samuel," he corrected gently. "And there's no debt between us, Miss Winslow. Anyone would have done the same." Her smile held a sad wisdom beyond her years. He guessed she couldn't be much past 25. "I'm not sure that's true, but I appreciate the sentiment." "Samuel." Rosa appeared at the door, breaking the moment between them. "Dinner is ready," she announced. "Senor Ryder, you will wash before coming to my table." Samuel couldn't help but chuckle at the housekeeper's maternal scolding. "Yes, madam," he replied, turning back to Beatrice. "Rosa's been with me since I built this place 7 years ago. She runs the house with an iron fist." "And it is good that I do," Rosa retorted with a fond smile. "Otherwise, you would live like a wild animal." Dinner was a simple but hearty affair: venison stew with fresh bread and preserves. Beatrice ate with surprising appetite for someone who had experienced such trauma, though Samuel noticed how her hand occasionally trembled when she lifted her spoon. "May I ask where you were headed, Miss Winslow?" he inquired as Rosa served coffee after the meal. Beatrice's gaze dropped to her cup. "San Francisco," she answered. "I was to meet my fiancé there. He's in shipping and sent for me once he was established." Something cold and unexpected twisted in Samuel's gut at the mention of a fiancé. "I see. Well, once you're recovered, we can arrange transport to continue your journey." "That's just it," Beatrice said, meeting his eyes with a directness that took him by surprise. "I'm not certain I wish to continue." Samuel raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to elaborate. "Edward, my fiancé, and I have corresponded for over a year, but we've spent barely 2 weeks in each other's company," she explained. "It was a match arranged by my father before he passed. I've been living with my aunt in Boston since then, waiting until Edward deemed it time for me to join him." "And now," Samuel prompted when she fell silent. "Now I've survived something that should have killed me," Beatrice replied, a new resolve in her voice. "Perhaps it's a sign that I should reconsider my path." Rosa, who had been quietly clearing dishes, murmured something in Spanish that made Samuel shoot her a warning glance. The older woman merely shrugged, unrepentant, and continued her work. "You've had a shock," Samuel said carefully. "Decisions made in such moments aren't always the wisest." Beatrice studied him, her brown eyes thoughtful. "You may be right, but I've never felt more clarity than I do right now, strange as that may sound." The conversation shifted to safer topics as the evening progressed. Samuel learned that Beatrice had been raised in Boston, the daughter of a successful merchant who had invested heavily in Western expansion. Her mother had died when she was 12, leaving her father to raise her with the help of a succession of governesses until his own passing 3 years prior. "And you," she asked as Rosa brought a lamp to the table, the house growing dark around them. "Have you always been in Wyoming?" Samuel shook his head. "I came west after the war, served with the Union, couldn't settle back into Virginia life afterward. Worked as a ranch hand for a few years, saved enough to stake my own claim." "The war changed many lives," Beatrice observed softly. "My father's business thrived because of it, though he never spoke of that with pride." "There's no pride to be found in that conflict," Samuel agreed. "Only lessons, most of them hard-earned." Rosa appeared at the doorway. "I have prepared the guest room for Señorita Winslow," she announced, "and tomorrow I will help her with the new dress." Beatrice thanked the housekeeper sincerely before turning back to Samuel. "I don't wish to impose on your hospitality for long. If there's work I can do to earn my keep while I'm here, I'm willing." Samuel found himself smiling at her determination. "Let's focus on your recovery first. Then we can discuss arrangements." That night, as he sat on the porch with his pipe, Samuel watched the moon rise over the eastern ridge, casting silver light across his land. The woman sleeping in his guest room presented a complication he hadn't anticipated. Her presence stirred something in him that had lain dormant for years, not just physical attraction, though she was undeniably beautiful, but a deeper connection that made no logical sense given their brief acquaintance. And there was the matter of her fiancé in San Francisco, regardless of her current uncertainty. Samuel Ryder was many things, but a man who interfered with another's betrothal was not one of them. With a sigh, he tapped out his pipe and rose to his feet. Morning would come early, as it always did, with cattle to tend and fences to mend. The business of living continued, regardless of unexpected guests and unwelcome feelings. Beatrice awoke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, momentary panic gripping her until memory returned: the stagecoach, the attack, the cowboy who had saved her. Pain radiated through her body as she sat up, bruises making themselves known in places she hadn't realized were injured. The dress Samuel had purchased lay across a chair by the window, a simple calico in a muted blue pattern. Beatrice touched the fabric, surprisingly soft for a ready-made garment. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Rosa had helped her bathe the night before, the older woman clucking sympathetically at the bruises that mottled Beatrice's pale skin. The housekeeper's gentle hands and soothing Spanish murmurs had reminded Beatrice of her childhood nurse, bringing both comfort and a wave of homesickness for a place that no longer existed for her. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Señorita, are you awake?" Rosa called softly. "Yes, please come in," Beatrice replied, hastily wiping her eyes. The housekeeper entered with a tray bearing coffee and toast. "Señor Ryder has already gone to check the north pasture," she informed Beatrice. "He said to tell you he will return for midday meal." "Thank you," Beatrice said, accepting the tray gratefully. "And thank you for your kindness last night. I was overwhelmed." Rosa patted her hand. "It is nothing. Now eat, and then we will see about making that dress fit properly." The morning passed in domestic activity that Beatrice found surprisingly comforting. Rosa showed her around the house, a well-built structure with 4 bedrooms upstairs and generous living spaces below. The furnishings were simple but of good quality, and touches of refinement suggested that Samuel valued comfort over ostentation. "The señor built much of this himself," Rosa explained as they toured the main floor. "He is good with his hands." In the kitchen, Rosa enlisted Beatrice's help preparing bread dough, while the housekeeper worked on a stew for the midday meal. Despite her upbringing, Beatrice was not unfamiliar with household tasks. Her aunt had believed in practical education alongside more genteel accomplishments. "Rosa," Beatrice ventured as she kneaded the dough. "How did you come to work for Mr. Ryder?" The older woman smiled, lines crinkling around her dark eyes. "My husband worked for a ranch near here. When he died pneumonia 5 winters ago, I had nowhere to go. Senor Ryder needed a housekeeper and I needed a home," she shrugged. "It was a good arrangement for us both." "He seems a kind employer," Beatrice observed. "Kind, yes, but sad." Rosa crossed herself. "He lost someone before coming west. He does not speak of it, but I see it in his eyes sometimes, especially when he thinks no one is watching." Beatrice absorbed this information, thinking of the moments when Samuel's expression had seemed to retreat inward, as though viewing a landscape only he could see. "The war left many wounds," she said softly, "not all of them visible." Rosa nodded sagely. "You understand such things, I think." Before Beatrice could respond, the sound of hoofbeats announced a rider approaching. Rosa moved to the window, her expression shifting to one of displeasure. "Trouble," she muttered, wiping her hands on her apron. "What is it?" Beatrice asked, joining her at the window. A man on horseback was approaching the house, his posture rigid with authority. Even at a distance, his attire marked him as no ordinary visitor, the dark suit and hat suggesting a man of business or law. "Marshal Blackburn," Rosa explained with evident distaste. "He comes from Cheyenne sometimes, asking questions, making accusations." "Accusations about what?" "The Stagecoach robberies. He thinks Senor Ryder knows something because his land is near where they happen." The housekeeper's eyes flashed with indignation. As if Senor would ever involve himself with such criminals. The marshal dismounted before the house, tying his horse to the hitching post. His face, visible now, was all hard angles and cold calculation, his mustache neatly trimmed above thin lips. "Stay inside," Rosa instructed Beatrice. "I will speak to him." But as the housekeeper moved toward the door, Beatrice felt a strange compulsion to follow. Something about the marshal's arrival in Samuel's absence struck her as deliberately timed. Rosa stepped onto the porch, her posture defensive. "Senor Ryder is not here, Marshal Blackburn." "I can see that, Mrs. Diaz," the marshal replied, his tone curt. "When do you expect him back?" "Not until midday. He is working with the cattle." The marshal's gaze shifted, landing on Beatrice, who stood in the doorway. His eyes narrowed slightly, assessing her with the clinical precision of a man accustomed to cataloging details. "And who might this be?" he asked, removing his hat in a gesture that felt more like protocol than genuine courtesy. Before Rosa could intervene, Beatrice stepped forward. "Beatrice Winslow, sir. I'm a guest of Mr. Ryder's." Something calculating entered the marshal's expression. "A guest? How interesting. I wasn't aware Ryder entertained female visitors." The implication in his tone made Beatrice's cheeks warm, but she lifted her chin. "I was a passenger on the stagecoach that was attacked yesterday. Mr. Ryder found me in the wreckage and brought me here to recover. I'm the only survivor." This information clearly surprised the marshal. "Is that so? Then perhaps you and I should have a conversation, Miss Winslow. I've been tracking these road agents for months." "As I said, she is recovering," Rosa interjected firmly. "Your questions can wait until Senor Ryder returns." Marshal Blackburn's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Very well. I'll return this afternoon. In the meantime, Miss Winslow, I suggest you consider carefully what you saw during the attack. The smallest detail could be important." After the marshal departed, Rosa muttered something in Spanish that Beatrice suspected was uncomplimentary. "That man," the housekeeper said as they returned to the kitchen. "He has decided Senor is guilty of something, and now he only looks for proof, not truth." "Why would he suspect Samuel of involvement with road agents?" Beatrice asked, bewildered. Rosa's expression darkened. 2 years ago, Senor hired a man who turned out to be a criminal. The marshal believes Senor knew this, that they were working together. But it is not true. When Senor discovered the man's true nature, he himself rode to town to inform Sheriff Davis. What happened to the man? He was arrested, tried in Cheyenne. He hanged. Rosa crossed herself again. A bad business. But since then, the marshal watches Senor like a hawk. The sound of a horse approaching again made them both tense, but Rosa's expression relaxed as she looked out the window. "It is Samuel Ryder," she confirmed. Samuel entered the kitchen moments later, removing his hat and gloves. His expression was taut with barely contained anger. "I saw Blackburn riding away," he said without preamble. "What did he want?" Rosa quickly explained the marshal's visit and his intention to return later to question Beatrice. Samuel's jaw clenched as he listened. "I'm sorry to bring trouble to your door," Beatrice said when Rosa finished. "Perhaps I should speak with him, tell him what little I know." Samuel shook his head. "Blackburn twists words to suit his purposes. I don't want you alone with him." He ran a hand through his hair, disheveled from the hat. "I'll be present when he questions you." "You don't trust this marshal," Beatrice observed, "even though he represents the law." "A badge doesn't guarantee honor," Samuel replied, his voice low. "Blackburn's been looking for a reason to shut down my ranch for 2 years. He thinks I'm connected to these robberies because one of my former hands turned out to be a thief." Beatrice studied him, taking in the earnest blue eyes and the tension in his shoulders. In the short time she'd known him, Samuel Ryder had shown himself to be nothing but honorable and kind. Her instincts, which she'd always trusted, told her he was a good man caught in circumstances beyond his control. "I'll be careful with my words," she promised. "I have no desire to cause you difficulty after all you've done for me." Something in his expression softened. "I appreciate that. Now, let's eat before Blackburn returns. Rosa's stew is too good to let a marshal's visit ruin our appetites." The meal passed pleasantly despite the tension of the impending interview. Beatrice found herself drawn into conversation about the ranch, Samuel's plans for expanding his herd, and the challenges of Wyoming winters. There was an ease between them that belied their short acquaintance, as though they'd known each other for years rather than a day. After the meal, Samuel excused himself to clean up before the marshal's return. Left alone in the sitting room, Beatrice found herself drawn to the bookshelves that lined one wall. The collection was impressive for a frontier ranch: classics of literature, historical accounts, and practical guides to ranching and animal husbandry. Her fingers traced the spine of a volume of Tennyson's poetry, surprised to find such a work here. "My mother's," Samuel's voice came from the doorway. He'd changed into a clean shirt and had combed his hair, though it still curled slightly at his collar. "She taught literature before marrying my father." "She had excellent taste," Beatrice replied, turning to face him. "Did she come west with you?" A shadow passed across his features. "No, she died during the war. Typhoid fever took half our town in '63. "I'm sorry," Beatrice said softly. "My mother passed when I was young as well. It leaves a particular kind of emptiness, doesn't it?" Samuel nodded, his gaze meeting hers with an understanding that required no further words. For a moment, they stood in shared silence, the connection between them deepening in unspoken recognition of mutual loss. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching riders, more than one this time. Samuel moved to the window, his posture tensing. "Blackburn's brought company," he observed grimly. "Sheriff Davis is with him." When the lawman entered, the atmosphere in the sitting room grew heavy with unspoken accusations. Sheriff Davis, at least, had the grace to look uncomfortable as Marshal Blackburn launched immediately into his questioning of Beatrice. Describe the men who attacked the stagecoach, Blackburn demanded without preamble. Beatrice, seated on the settee with Samuel standing protectively nearby, folded her hands in her lap. "I can't," she replied simply. The marshal's eyes narrowed. "Can't or won't, Miss Winslow, can't," she repeated firmly. "I never saw them clearly." The attack happened suddenly. Shots were fired, the stagecoach overturned. I was thrown against the side and lost consciousness. When I awoke, Mr. Ryder was there, and the attackers were gone. "Convenient," Blackburn muttered, pacing before the fireplace. "Did you hear voices? Anything distinctive about the gunfire?" Beatrice closed her eyes, trying to recall those terrifying moments before darkness claimed her. "There were shouts, but I couldn't make out words. Multiple guns firing. The driver called out a warning just before the first shot." "And you saw nothing that might identify these men? Not their clothing, their horses, anything?" "I've told you, Marshal, I lost consciousness almost immediately," Beatrice said, frustration edging her tone. "I wish I could be more helpful, but I can't invent details I didn't witness." Sheriff Davis cleared his throat. "The lady's been through an ordeal, Blackburn. Maybe ease up a bit." The marshal ignored him, his attention shifting to Samuel. "Mighty fortunate you happened along when you did, Ryder. Almost as if you knew exactly where to look." Samuel's expression hardened. "I was returning from Snake River. The stage route crosses the trail to my ranch. There was nothing fortunate about it for those who died." "And yet, here sits one survivor," Blackburn pressed. "A pretty young woman saved by the heroic rancher. Quite the coincidence." Beatrice felt her temper rising. "Are you suggesting Mr. Ryder was somehow involved in the attack that killed 4 innocent people? The same attack he reported to Sheriff Davis, and from which he rescued me?" "I'm suggesting, Miss Winslow, that things on the frontier aren't always what they appear," Blackburn replied coldly. "Men with seemingly respectable facades have been known to lead double lives." Sheriff Davis stepped forward. "That's enough, Marshal. You've got no evidence linking Samuel to these robberies, just your own suspicions. The lady's told you what she knows." Blackburn's gaze lingered on Samuel, challenge in every line of his body. "For now," he conceded finally. "But I'll be watching, Ryder. And Miss Winslow, I suggest you be careful about the company you keep while you're recovering from your ordeal." After the lawman departed, tension hung in the air like smoke. Samuel stood at the window, watching them ride away, his shoulders rigid with suppressed anger. "I'm sorry," Beatrice said quietly. "I've brought this trouble to your home." Samuel turned to face her, his expression softening. "This trouble's been brewing long before you arrived. Blackburn's had it in for me since the incident with Jenkins, the hired hand who turned out to be a criminal." Samuel nodded, moving to sit in the armchair across from her. "Tom Jenkins worked for me for 3 months. Quiet man, good with horses. I had no idea he'd robbed a bank in Colorado until a wanted poster with his likeness arrived at the sheriff's office." His jaw tightened. "I rode into town myself when I recognized him, told Davis everything. They arrested Jenkins the next day. And Marshal Blackburn believes you were knowingly harboring a fugitive?" Beatrice asked. "Worse. He thinks I was working with Jenkins, that we were planning robberies together." Samuel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Beatrice was beginning to recognize as a sign of his frustration. "Jenkins didn't help matters. At his trial, he claimed I'd known all along who he was, said we'd planned to rob the bank in Snake River next. But surely they didn't believe him over you." "Davis didn't, but Blackburn." Samuel's voice trailed off. "Let's just say the marshal sees conspiracies where most men see coincidence." Beatrice studied the man before her, his honest face troubled but unafraid, his hands strong but gentle as they rested on the arms of the chair. In the short time she'd known him, Samuel Ryder had shown himself to be a man of principle and kindness. The thought that anyone could believe him capable of violence against innocent travelers seemed absurd. "I believe you," she said simply, "and I'll tell anyone who asks the same." Something shifted in Samuel's expression, surprise, followed by a warmth that made Beatrice's heart beat a little faster. "Thank you," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "That means more than you might know." The days that followed fell into a rhythm that brought unexpected comfort to Beatrice. Her bruises began to fade, and with them, the immediate shock of the attack. In their place grew a sense of purpose and belonging that surprised her. She found herself helping Rosa with household tasks, learning to cook frontier-style meals, and even assisting Samuel with the garden that provided much of their fresh food. Letters were sent, one to her aunt in Boston explaining the delay in her journey, and another to Edward in San Francisco, though Beatrice found herself struggling with what to tell her fiancé. In the end, she simply informed him of the attack and her recovery at the Ryder Ranch, promising to write again when her plans became clearer. A week after her arrival, Beatrice stood at the corral fence watching as Samuel worked with a young horse, guiding the animal in circles at the end of a long lead. The grace with which man and beast moved together spoke of mutual respect rather than dominance. "You have a way with them," she called as he brought the horse to a stop, rewarding it with a gentle pat on the neck. Samuel looked up, a smile breaking across his face at the sight of her. "They're honest creatures," he replied, securing the horse before joining her at the fence. "No pretense or hidden motives. Unlike some people we know," Beatrice said wryly, thinking of Marshal Blackburn's thinly veiled accusations. Samuel chuckled, leaning against the fence beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched, and Beatrice was acutely aware of his presence, the scent of leather and clean sweat, the warmth radiating from him even in the afternoon sun. "Have you given more thought to your plans?" he asked after a moment of companionable silence. "Sheriff Davis mentioned the next eastbound stage comes through Snake River in 2 days if you're wanting to return to Boston." Beatrice turned to study his profile, noting the careful neutrality of his expression. "And if I'm not?" His eyes met hers, questioning. "Your fiancé will be expecting you in San Francisco." "Edward and I barely know each other," she replied, voicing the thought that had been growing stronger each day. "Our engagement was arranged when I was too grief-stricken over my father's death to protest. The man is practically a stranger to me." "And yet you agreed to travel across the country to marry him," Samuel observed, his tone free of judgment. Beatrice sighed, turning to gaze across the expansive landscape that surrounded the ranch. The distant mountains, the rolling grasslands, the clear blue sky, all of it spoke to something within her that had been dormant during her constrained life in Boston. "I agreed because it seemed the proper thing to do," she admitted. "Because I had no other prospects, and my aunt made it clear I couldn't remain with her indefinitely." She laughed softly, the sound tinged with irony. "How strange that it took nearly dying to make me question whether I was truly living." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze following hers across the land he'd claimed as his own. "What would you do?" he finally asked. "If you didn't continue to San Francisco?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibilities neither had dared voice aloud. Beatrice felt her heart quicken, aware they stood at a crossroads that would determine the course of her future. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but for the first time I'm not afraid of that uncertainty." She turned to face him fully. "These past days, working alongside you and Rosa, I've felt more purpose than I ever did in Boston society." Something kindled in Samuel's eyes, hope, perhaps, or a reflection of her own awakening. "There's plenty of work on a ranch for hands willing to learn," he said carefully. "And Snake River could use a schoolteacher." Sheriff mentioned the town's growing, families settling. "A teacher," Beatrice echoed, the idea taking root. Her education had been thorough if focused on becoming a suitable society wife. The thought of using that knowledge to build something meaningful appealed deeply. "I could do that." "You could do anything you set your mind to," Samuel said, his voice carrying a conviction that warmed her. "I've seen how quickly you adapt, how eager you are to learn new skills." "Skills my aunt would consider thoroughly unsuitable for a lady," Beatrice laughed, thinking of her pleasure at successfully baking bread in Rosa's kitchen or helping to deliver a calf 2 days prior. Samuel's smile faded, his expression growing serious. "What about your fiancé?" "He'll be expecting explanations." The question sobered Beatrice. Edward Chamberlain was not a man accustomed to disappointment. Their correspondence, while polite, had always carried undertones of his expectation that she would conform to his vision of a suitable wife. Breaking their engagement would not be received graciously. "I'll write to him," she said resolutely. "Explain that circumstances have changed. It's the honorable thing to do, rather than continuing toward a marriage neither of us truly desires." "You're certain he doesn't desire it?" Samuel asked, his tone careful. "Edward desires a society wife who will enhance his standing in San Francisco," Beatrice replied. "He doesn't know me, not really. Our letters have been proper and distant discussions of weather and business prospects, never of hopes or dreams." She shook her head. "That's not a foundation for a life together." Samuel's hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the fence rail. The contact sent warmth spreading up her arm. "Whatever you decide, you have a place here for as long as you need." Their gazes held, the moment stretching between them with unspoken possibility. Beatrice was acutely aware of his proximity, of the gentle pressure of his hand on hers, of the way the sun brought out gold highlights in his brown hair. The spell was broken by Rosa calling from the house that dinner would soon be ready. Samuel withdrew his hand reluctantly, and Beatrice immediately missed the connection. "We should head in," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Rosa gets cross if we're late to the table." As they walked together toward the house, Beatrice felt a certainty settling over her. The decision that had seemed so daunting just days ago now felt inevitable, as natural as the changing seasons. Her journey west had taken an unexpected turn, but perhaps this detour was always meant to be her true destination. That evening, after dinner, she sat at the small desk in her room and composed 2 letters. The first, to her aunt, explained her decision to remain in Wyoming Territory and seek employment as a teacher. The second, to Edward, respectfully but firmly broke their engagement, citing the Stagecoach attack as a catalyst for reconsidering her life's direction. As she sealed the envelopes, Beatrice felt not regret but relief, as though she'd set down a burden she hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. Tomorrow, Samuel would take the letters to Snake River when he went to town for supplies. By the time responses arrived, her new path would already be underway. She slept soundly that night, dreamless and peaceful for the first time since the attack. When dawn broke, Beatrice rose with a sense of purpose, dressing in the practical clothes Rosa had altered for her, a simple skirt and blouse that allowed freedom of movement unlike her Boston attire. Samuel was already at the breakfast table when she came downstairs, his expression brightening as she entered. "You look ready for a day's work," he observed, pouring her a cup of coffee from the pot on the table. "I am," she confirmed, accepting the cup with a smile. "I thought I might ride into town with you, speak with Sheriff Davis about the teaching position you mentioned." Surprise and pleasure mingled in Samuel's expression. "You've decided, then?" "I have," Beatrice replied, her voice steady with conviction. "It's time I built a life of my own choosing." Samuel's smile held a warmth that made her heart flutter. "I'll saddle Daisy for you. She's gentle enough for a beginner." The ride to Snake River took just over an hour, the morning sun warming their backs as they traveled side by side. Samuel pointed out landmarks along the way, a distinctive rock formation, the creek that fed into the larger river, the distant smoke from a neighboring ranch's chimney. Beatrice soaked in the information, already feeling a connection to this rugged landscape that she'd never experienced in Boston's manicured gardens. Snake River was bustling with morning activity when they arrived. Samuel helped Beatrice dismount outside the general store, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. The contact sent a pleasant shiver through her, one she was becoming increasingly familiar with in his presence. "I'll see to mailing your letters while you speak with Davis," Samuel said, securing their horses to the hitching post. "Meet back here in an hour." Beatrice nodded, suddenly nervous about the step she was about to take. Sensing her uncertainty, Samuel squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You'll do fine. Davis has been hoping to find a teacher for months." The sheriff's office was a simple wooden building at the end of the main street. Davis was at his desk when Beatrice entered, poring over wanted posters with a furrowed brow. He looked up, surprise registering at the sight of her. "Miss Winslow," he greeted, rising to his feet. "Didn't expect to see you in town so soon after your ordeal. How are you faring?" "Much improved, thank you," she replied. "Mr. Ryder mentioned that Snake River is in need of a teacher. I've come to offer my services." Davis's bushy eyebrows rose. "A teacher? Thought you were bound for San Francisco." "Plans change, Sheriff." Beatrice straightened her shoulders. "I was educated at Miss Porter's school in Connecticut and served as a governess briefly before my father's passing. I'm well qualified to teach children of all ages." A slow smile spread across the sheriff's weathered face. "Well now, that's the best news I've heard in months. The town council's been trying to convince families to settle here, but without proper schooling for their young ones, it's been an uphill battle." He gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Miss Winslow. Let's discuss particulars." By the time she rejoined Samuel outside the general store, Beatrice was officially employed as Snake River's first schoolteacher. The position came with a small salary and living quarters above the newly constructed schoolhouse at the edge of town. "It's settled," she told him, unable to contain her excitement. "I start next month, after the harvest is finished and families can spare their children for lessons." Samuel's smile was genuine, though something flickered in his eyes that Beatrice couldn't quite interpret. "Congratulations. The town's lucky to have you." As they rode back to the ranch, Beatrice found herself stealing glances at the man beside her. In the short time she'd known Samuel Ryder, he'd become central to her new vision of the future. The thought of moving into town, of seeing him only occasionally when he came in for supplies, created an unexpected ache in her chest. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Beatrice found Samuel on the porch, pipe in hand as he gazed toward the distant mountains. She settled into the chair beside him, drawing her shawl around her shoulders against the cooling air. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything." Samuel turned to her, the dying light casting his features in warm gold. "You don't need to thank me, Beatrice. You've earned your place here through your own strength." "Nevertheless," she insisted, "if you hadn't found me that day—" "But I did," he interrupted gently. "Some might call it chance, but I'm not so sure." Their gazes held, the moment laden with unspoken feelings. Beatrice found herself wondering what it would be like to close the distance between them, to feel his lips against hers. The thought sent heat rising to her cheeks. Samuel seemed to read her thoughts, his expression softening as he leaned slightly toward her. Beatrice. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching riders, multiple horses moving at speed. Samuel was on his feet instantly, his relaxed posture replaced by alertness. "Stay here," he instructed, moving to the porch railing to peer into the gathering darkness. "Rosa," he called into the house. "Bring my rifle." Beatrice rose, alarmed by the sudden tension. "What is it? Who's coming?" Before Samuel could answer, 5 riders emerged from the shadows, their horses slowing as they approached the house. The lead rider was instantly recognizable Marshal Blackburn, his face set in grim lines of satisfaction. Behind him rode 4 deputies, all armed and watchful. "Samuel Ryder." Blackburn called, reining his horse to a stop. "I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, robbery, and murder." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face as Samuel descended the porch steps, his posture deliberately non-threatening despite the rage she could sense beneath his calm exterior. "What the hell are you talking about, Blackburn?" Samuel demanded. "What murder?" The marshal dismounted, producing an official-looking paper from inside his coat. "The Stagecoach robberies. We've apprehended one of the gang, and he's named you as the mastermind behind the operations." "That's absurd," Beatrice exclaimed, ignoring Samuel's earlier instruction as she moved to stand beside him. "Mr. Ryder saved me from that attack. Why would he do that if he was involved?" Blackburn's cold gaze shifted to her. "Perhaps to establish an alibi, Miss Winslow. Or perhaps because you were part of his plan all along." Samuel's hand clenched into a fist at his side. "Leave her out of this, Blackburn. Your quarrel is with me." "My duty is to the law," the marshal countered, "and the law says you're to come with us to Cheyenne to stand trial." He gestured to his deputies. "Search the house and outbuildings. Look for stolen goods, weapons matching those used in the robberies." Rosa appeared on the porch, Samuel's rifle in her hands. One of the deputies immediately trained his weapon on her. "Put it down, madam," he ordered. "It's all right, Rosa," Samuel called, his voice steady despite the tension. "Do as he says." The housekeeper reluctantly placed the rifle on the porch floor, her expression one of barely contained fury. "This is wrong," she said, her accent thickening with emotion. "Senor Ryder is a good man." Blackburn ignored her, focusing on Samuel. "Are you going to come peacefully, Ryder, or do my men need to persuade you?" Samuel's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "I'll come. But I want it on record that I deny all charges. This is nothing but a vendetta based on circumstantial evidence." As the deputies moved to secure Samuel, Beatrice felt panic rising within her. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "Samuel, tell them about Jenkins, about how he lied. It'll be all right," Samuel assured her, though his eyes betrayed his concern. "Ride to Snake River tomorrow. Tell Sheriff Davis what's happened. He knows me, knows I wouldn't do this." One of the deputies bound Samuel's hands before him with rope, the indignity of the act making Beatrice's blood boil. "You can't just take him," she protested to Blackburn. "Where's your evidence? Who is this supposed gang member who's accused him?" "That information is part of an ongoing investigation," Blackburn replied dismissively. "Step aside, Miss Winslow, unless you'd like to join Mr. Ryder in custody." Rosa moved to Beatrice's side, placing a restraining hand on her arm. "Not now, señorita," she murmured. "We help him better if we are free." Samuel was led to his own horse and helped to mount, the rope binding his wrists then tied to the saddle horn. The humiliation of it was evident in the rigid set of his shoulders, though his expression remained stoic. "I'll be back," he called to Beatrice as the group prepared to depart. "This will be settled, I promise you." Beatrice could only nod. words failing her as she watched the man who had saved her life being led away like a common criminal. Beside her, Rosa muttered prayers in Spanish, her hands working the beads of a rosary pulled from her pocket. As the riders disappeared into the darkness, a terrible stillness fell over the ranch. The house that had begun to feel like home now seemed vulnerable, exposed to threats Beatrice had only begun to comprehend. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice small in the vast silence. Rosa squared her shoulders, determination replacing despair. "Now, Señorita, we fight. For Señor Ryder we fight." Dawn found Beatrice and Rosa riding toward Snake River, determination fueling them despite a nearly sleepless night. They had spent hours discussing possibilities, piecing together what little they knew about the Stagecoach robberies and Marshal Blackburn's apparent vendetta against Samuel. "The timing is suspicious," Beatrice had observed as they sat at the kitchen table long after midnight. "Just as I decide to stay in Wyoming to build a life here, Samuel is arrested on false charges." Rosa had nodded, her dark eyes narrowed in thought. "The marshal, he watched the house for days after you arrived. I saw his men in the hills, though they thought they were hidden." This information had sent a chill through Beatrice. "You think he was waiting for something? For evidence against Samuel? Or for an opportunity?" Rosa had replied grimly. "The Señor has many enemies among those who wish to claim his land. It is good grazing with reliable water." Now, as they approached Snake River, Beatrice rehearsed what she would say to Sheriff Davis. The lawman had seemed fair-minded in their previous encounters, and Samuel clearly trusted him. But would his authority extend to challenging a federal marshal's warrant? The town was just stirring to life when they arrived, shopkeepers opening their doors and a few early risers making their way to the cafe for breakfast. Beatrice and Rosa headed directly for the sheriff's office, dismounting and securing their horses with haste. Davis was already at his desk, hat pushed back on his head as he sipped coffee and reviewed papers. He looked up in surprise as they entered. "Miss Winslow, Mrs. Diaz," he greeted, rising to his feet. "What brings you ladies to town so early?" His expression shifted as he registered their distress. "Something's happened. Marshal Blackburn arrested Samuel last night," Beatrice explained, the words tumbling out. "He claims Samuel is behind the Stagecoach robberies, that someone from the gang named him as the mastermind." Davis's bushy eyebrows drew together. "Arrested Samuel? On whose authority?" "He had a warrant," Rosa supplied. "From a judge in Cheyenne. They took him there for trial." The sheriff sank back into his chair, expression troubled. "This is Blackburn's doing. He's been after Samuel since that business with Jenkins, convinced they were working together despite all evidence to the contrary." "Is there anything you can do?" Beatrice asked, hope flaring. "You know Samuel's character, know he would never harm innocent people." Davis sighed heavily. "A federal marshal's warrant outranks my authority, Miss Winslow, but that doesn't mean we can't fight this through proper channels." He reached for a sheet of paper. "I'll write to Judge Hollister in Cheyenne immediately. He's a fair man, won't rush to judgment based on Blackburn's suspicions alone." "A letter will take days to reach Cheyenne," Beatrice protested. "Samuel could be facing trial by then." "Not necessarily," Davis replied, already beginning to write. "The territorial justice system moves slowly, especially for serious charges. There'll be time for character witnesses, for investigating this supposed gang member who's accused him." He looked up. "Who did Blackburn say had named Samuel?" "He wouldn't tell us," Rosa answered. "Said it was part of an ongoing investigation." Davis's frown deepened. "That's not right. The accused has the right to know who's testifying against him." He set down his pen. "Something's not adding up here." A thought struck Beatrice with sudden clarity. The stagecoach I was on, did they ever catch any of the robbers from that attack? Not that I've heard, Davis replied. Why? Because I'm the only witness, Beatrice said slowly, the pieces falling into place. And I never saw the attackers clearly. What if Blackburn is using my presence at the ranch to build a case against Samuel? What if there is no gang member who's confessed? Davis's expression sharpened with interest. That would be a serious abuse of power. But why would Blackburn go to such lengths? For the land, Rosa stated firmly. Samuel Ryder's ranch sits on valuable grazing territory with good water access. If he were convicted of serious crimes, the property would be seized, Davis finished, understanding dawning. And Blackburn, as the arresting officer, would have influence over its disposal. He shook his head. It's a stretch, but I've seen men do worse for less. Then we need to prove Samuel's innocence, Beatrice declared. And we need to do it quickly. Davis nodded, determination replacing his earlier concern. I'll finish this letter to Judge Hollister, then send telegrams to my contacts in the territorial law enforcement. We need to verify whether any gang members have actually been captured, and if so, what they've really said. What can we do? Beatrice asked, unwilling to simply wait while Samuel faced false charges. The sheriff considered for a moment. Return to the ranch for now. If Blackburn or his men come back looking for evidence, I want to know about it immediately. He reached into his desk drawer, retrieving a small revolver which he offered to Beatrice. Do you know how to use this? Beatrice hesitated only briefly before accepting the weapon. Her father, progressive in many ways, had insisted she learn basic firearm handling for protection. Yes, she replied, checking that the revolver was loaded, but I pray it won't be necessary. As do I, Davis agreed, but these are uncertain times and you ladies are alone out there now. He turned to Rosa. Mrs. Diaz, is there anyone you can send for, family or friends who might stay at the ranch until this is resolved? Rosa shook her head. My family is far to the south, but we will manage, Sheriff. We are stronger than we look. Davis's weathered face creased in a smile. Of that I have no doubt, he sobered quickly. I'll ride out to check on you tomorrow, bring any news I receive. In the meantime, keep your doors locked and your eyes open. As they prepared to leave, Beatrice paused. Sheriff, if you write to Samuel, tell him. She hesitated, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Tell him we believe in him and we won't stop fighting until he's free. Davis nodded solemnly. I will, Miss Winslow, and for what it's worth, I believe in him too. Samuel Ryder is one of the finest men I've ever known. We won't let him face this alone. The ride back to the ranch was tense, both women scanning the landscape for signs of Blackburn or his deputies. The property appeared undisturbed when they returned, though the absence of Samuel's commanding presence left the buildings feeling oddly diminished. Inside, evidence of the deputy's search was everywhere, drawers pulled out, cupboards standing open, Samuel's desk in the study ransacked. Methodically, Rosa and Beatrice began to restore order, each finding comfort in the mundane task of setting things right. Did they take anything? Beatrice asked as they worked. Rosa shrugged. Hard to say. Senor keeps his important papers in the safe in his bedroom. They could not open it without the combination. This gave Beatrice pause. What if there's something in there that could help Samuel? Letters or documents that might prove his innocence. Only Senor knows the combination, Rosa replied, her expression troubled. Beatrice moved to the window, gazing out at the land Samuel had built into a thriving ranch through years of hard work. The thought of him sitting in a jail cell while his reputation and livelihood hung in the balance made her heart ache. There must be something we're missing, she murmured, more to herself than to Rosa. Some reason Blackburn is so convinced of Samuel's guilt, or so determined to make him appear guilty. Rosa joined her at the window, her weathered hand coming to rest on Beatrice's shoulder. "You care deeply for him," she observed quietly. "For Senor Ryder." It wasn't a question, but Beatrice answered anyway. "I do, more than I thought possible in such a short time." She turned to the older woman, vulnerability in her expression. "Is that foolish, to feel so strongly for someone I've known barely 2 weeks?" Rosa's smile was gentle. "The heart knows what it knows, Senorita. Time is not always the best measure of true feeling." She patted Beatrice's shoulder. "And I have seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching, like a man who has found something precious he thought was lost forever." Warmth flooded Beatrice at these words, followed quickly by renewed determination. "Then we must find a way to help him. He saved my life. Now it's my turn to save his." The days that followed settled into a tense routine. Sheriff Davis rode out as promised, bringing news that Judge Hollister had received his letter and was reviewing the case. The supposed gang member who had implicated Samuel was being held in Cheyenne under tight security, with access restricted even to other law enforcement. "It stinks of manipulation," Davis had said grimly. "I've requested permission to interview the prisoner myself, but Blackburn's blocking it at every turn." A week after Samuel's arrest, Beatrice was tending the garden when the sound of an approaching rider drew her attention. Hand moving to the revolver she now kept at her side, she straightened, shading her eyes against the sun to identify the visitor. Relief washed over her as she recognized Sheriff Davis, though the urgency in his posture as he rode suggested news of significance. Rosa emerged from the house as he dismounted, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sheriff," Beatrice greeted, hurrying to meet him. "What is it? Is there news of Samuel?" Davis removed his hat, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. "There is, and it's not good. The trial's been moved up, scheduled for tomorrow morning in Cheyenne." "Tomorrow?" Rosa exclaimed. "But that is too soon. How can Senor Ryder prepare his defense?" "He can't," Davis replied grimly. "That's the point. Blackburn's pushing this through while Samuel's still isolated, before supporters can gather or evidence in his favor can be presented." Beatrice felt cold dread settling in her stomach. "What can we do?" "I'm riding to Cheyenne tonight," Davis said. "Judge Hollister has agreed to meet with me privately before the trial begins. If I can convince him there's reason to question Blackburn's evidence, he might delay proceedings." "I'm coming with you," Beatrice declared, decision made in an instant. "As a survivor of one of the Stagecoach attacks, my testimony could be crucial." Davis hesitated. "It's a hard ride, Miss Winslow. 30 miles to the railway station, then the early train to Cheyenne. We'd have to leave within the hour to make it." "I'll be ready," she assured him, already calculating what she would need. "Rosa, can you manage here alone?" The housekeeper nodded firmly. "Go, help Senor Ryder. I will pray for you both." Within the hour, Beatrice had changed into her most respectable dress, the blue calico Samuel had purchased for her, now altered to fit properly, and packed a small bag with essentials. Sheriff Davis waited patiently, having refreshed his horse and accepted a quick meal from Rosa. As they prepared to depart, Rosa pressed a small package into Beatrice's hands. "For the journey," she explained. "And this," she added, removing a silver medallion from around her neck. "Saint Michael, protector of those who seek justice, may he watch over you and Senor Ryder." Touched by the gesture, Beatrice carefully placed the medallion in her pocket. "Thank you, Rosa, for everything." The journey to the railway station was grueling, just as Davis had warned. They rode hard, stopping only briefly to rest the horses, racing against the setting sun. Beatrice's muscles screamed in protest. unaccustomed to such punishing travel despite her recent riding practice, but she uttered no complaint. They reached the station with barely 20 minutes to spare before the last eastbound train of the day departed. Davis secured tickets, while Beatrice refreshed herself as best she could in the station's rudimentary washroom, attempting to make herself presentable for the coming confrontation in Cheyenne. The train, when it arrived, was nearly empty, a blessing that allowed them a private compartment where they could speak freely. As the landscape rushed by in deepening darkness, Davis outlined what they knew and what they suspected about Blackburn's case against Samuel. "The timing of his arrest is suspicious," the sheriff explained. "Coming just when you'd decided to stay in Wyoming, just when Samuel seemed to be finding happiness again." Beatrice felt heat rise to her cheeks at the implication but didn't deny it. "You think Blackburn was watching us?" "That he knew I was planning to remain," Davis nodded grimly. "My deputy spotted one of Blackburn's men in town the day you came to inquire about the teaching position. Word travels fast in small communities." "But why would my decision to stay trigger Samuel's arrest?" Beatrice asked, puzzled. "Because you're a complication," Davis replied. "An educated, articulate witness who can testify to Samuel's character and his actions after the Stagecoach attack. Blackburn likely hoped you'd continue to San Francisco, removing a potential defense witness." The theory made disturbing sense. "And when I didn't, he accelerated his plans," Davis finished. "Before you could establish yourself further in the community, before your testimony could carry even more weight." Beatrice stared out the window at the moonlit landscape, anger building within her at the calculated injustice of it all. "We'll stop him," she said with quiet conviction. "Samuel doesn't deserve this." Davis studied her, approval in his weathered features. "No, he doesn't. And he's fortunate to have someone like you fighting for him." They arrived in Cheyenne shortly after dawn, the territorial capital already stirring with early morning activity. Davis led Beatrice to a modest hotel near the courthouse, where he secured a room for her to refresh herself while he sought out Judge Hollister. "I'll return as soon as I've spoken with him," Davis promised. "With luck, we can at least delay the trial until more evidence can be gathered." Left alone, Beatrice bathed and changed into her one good dress, her thoughts constantly returning to Samuel. Was he being treated well? Did he know they were fighting for him? The uncertainty was almost as painful as the separation itself. A knock at her door announced Davis's return sooner than expected. One look at his expression told Beatrice the news wasn't good. "Hollister's hands are tied," he reported grimly. "Blackburn has presented sworn testimony from a captured gang member naming Samuel as the mastermind behind all the robberies. The trial proceeds at 10 o'clock. Beatrice sank onto the edge of the bed, despair threatening to overwhelm her. "Can I at least see him before it begins?" "Let him know we're here," Davis shook his head regretfully. "Blackburn's got the jail locked down tight, no visitors allowed, supposedly for security reasons." "This is wrong," Beatrice whispered, hands clenching in her lap. "All of it." "Yes, it is," Davis agreed, "but we're not beaten yet. I've managed to get us seats in the courtroom, and I've arranged for you to be called as a character witness if the opportunity arises." Beatrice straightened, gathering her resolve. "Then we'd better prepare. What exactly is this supposed gang member claiming?" As Davis outlined the accusations against Samuel, Beatrice listened carefully, identifying inconsistencies and weaknesses in the narrative. By the time they walked to the courthouse, she felt armed with questions that might help expose the truth, if only she were given the chance to speak. The territorial courthouse of Cheyenne was an imposing brick building, its entrance flanked by columns that seemed to proclaim the solemnity of the proceedings within. Beatrice and Davis joined the crowd filing into the main courtroom, securing seats near the front where they would be visible to Samuel when he was brought in. At precisely 10 o'clock, a side door opened, and Samuel was led into the courtroom by two deputies. Beatrice's heart clenched at the sight of him, his hands shackled before him, his clothes rumpled from imprisonment, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Yet he held himself with dignity, his gaze steady as he surveyed the courtroom. When he spotted Beatrice and Davis, surprise flickered across his features, followed by a flash of emotion so powerful it made her breath catch. He gave a slight nod, gratitude, and something deeper evident in his eyes before he was directed to sit beside his court-appointed attorney. Judge Hollister entered next, a tall man with silver hair and piercing eyes that seemed to miss nothing as he took his place at the bench. Marshal Blackburn sat at the prosecution table, his posture radiating confidence bordering on smugness. The proceedings began with the reading of charges: conspiracy, robbery, and the murder of 12 people across 4 stagecoach attacks. Samuel's plea of not guilty rang clear and firm throughout the courtroom, his voice unwavering despite the gravity of the accusations. Blackburn presented his case first, calling witnesses who described the stagecoach robberies in detail, establishing the pattern of violence that had plagued the territory. None, however, could directly connect Samuel to the crimes. The marshal's key evidence, he explained, would come from Emmett Thorne, a captured member of the robbery gang who had turned state's evidence in exchange for leniency. When Thorne was brought in, a wiry man with shifty eyes and a perpetual sneer, Beatrice studied him intently. Something about him seemed familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. Under Blackburn's questioning, Thorne spun a tale of Samuel as the calculating leader of their gang, planning each robbery with precision and taking the lion's share of the spoils. According to his testimony, Samuel's ranch served as their base of operations, with stolen goods hidden in various outbuildings. And the most recent attack, Blackburn prompted. The one where all passengers were killed except for a young woman. What can you tell us about that? Thorne licked his lips nervously. Ryder planned that one special, said there was a woman on board carrying valuable jewelry, told us to make sure no witnesses survived this time. Beatrice felt her blood run cold. The man was lying, fabricating details about an attack he couldn't possibly have participated in if his own story of capture weeks earlier was true. Samuel's attorney, a young, inexperienced-looking man named Crawford, conducted a half-hearted cross-examination that did little to challenge Thorne's credibility. Beatrice found herself gripping the bench in frustration, willing the lawyer to ask the obvious questions about the timeline inconsistencies. When Crawford finished, Judge Hollister asked if there were any other witnesses for the prosecution. Blackburn rose to his feet. "The state rests, Your Honor." Crawford called several character witnesses for the defense, merchants from Snake River who attested to Samuel's honest dealings, a banker who confirmed his sound financial status, negating any need for robbery, a neighboring rancher who spoke of his generosity during hard times. But none could provide a solid alibi for the times of the attacks. Finally, to Beatrice's relief, Crawford called her name. She rose, heart pounding as she made her way to the witness stand. After being sworn in, she faced the courtroom, her gaze briefly meeting Samuel's. The trust in his eyes gave her courage. "Miss Winslow," Crawford began, "please tell the court how you came to know the defendant, Samuel Ryder." Beatrice recounted the stagecoach attack and Samuel's rescue with careful detail, emphasizing his immediate reporting of the crime to Sheriff Davis and his subsequent care for her injuries. She described the ranch, the honest work she had observed there, and the absence of any sign of ill-gotten gains or criminal associates. "And during your time at Mr. Ryder's ranch," Crawford continued, "did you ever observe anything that would suggest he was involved in criminal activities?" "Absolutely not," Beatrice replied firmly. "Mr. Ryder works from dawn until dusk managing his cattle and land. He keeps meticulous records of his business transactions, which anyone is welcome to review. There was nothing secretive or suspicious about his behavior." Crawford nodded, apparently satisfied with her testimony. "No further questions, Your Honor." Blackburn rose slowly, his expression calculating as he approached the witness stand. "Miss Winslow, you were traveling to San Francisco to meet your fiancé when the stagecoach was attacked, were you not?" Beatrice tensed, unsure where this line of questioning was heading. "Yes, that's correct." "And yet, instead of continuing your journey once you recovered from your injuries, you chose to remain in Wyoming territory. Why is that?" "Objection," Crawford called. "Relevance." "I'm establishing the witness's credibility and potential bias, Your Honor," Blackburn replied smoothly. Judge Hollister nodded. "I'll allow it. The witness will answer." Beatrice lifted her chin. "I decided to remain because the attack caused me to reevaluate my life's direction. I've accepted a position as the schoolteacher in Snake River, beginning next month." "How convenient," Blackburn remarked, his tone insinuating. "And would your decision to remain have anything to do with your relationship with the defendant?" Heat rose to Beatrice's cheeks, but she met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Ryder and I have become friends during my stay at his ranch. He has shown me nothing but kindness and respect." "Just friends?" Blackburn pressed, eyebrow raised. "Witnesses report seeing you and Ryder riding together, dining together in his home, behaving with a familiarity that suggests more than friendship." "Objection," Crawford called again, more forcefully. "The marshal is badgering the witness and making improper insinuations." "Sustained," Judge Hollister ruled. "Marshal Blackburn, confine your questions to relevant matters." Blackburn changed tack. "Miss Winslow, you testified that you lost consciousness during the attack and never saw the assailants. Is that correct?" "Yes," Beatrice confirmed. "Then how can you be certain that Mr. Ryder himself wasn't involved? That he didn't return to the scene to make himself appear the hero, knowing you were still alive and could serve as a witness to his supposed good character?" Anger flared within Beatrice. "Because a man who had participated in killing 4 innocent people wouldn't have risked taking in a surviving witness. He would have ensured there were no survivors at all." A murmur ran through the courtroom at her words. Blackburn's expression hardened. Unless he saw an opportunity to establish an alibi, to insert himself into the investigation as a concerned citizen rather than a suspect. "That's absurd," Beatrice countered. "Mr. Ryder has no need for the meager valuables carried by stagecoach passengers. He owns a successful ranch with prime grazing land and a growing herd. Why would he risk everything for trinkets and pocket watches?" Something flickered in Blackburn's eyes at the mention of the land satisfaction, perhaps at leading her where he wanted the conversation to go. "Indeed, why would he? Unless there was something more valuable at stake." He turned to address the court. "Like the payroll shipments often transported on these coaches, or the gold being moved from mining operations further west." Beatrice saw the trap too late. "There was no payroll on our coach," she stated firmly. "Just passengers and their personal belongings." "And how would you know that, Miss Winslow, unless you had inside information?" Blackburn pounced, voice rising triumphantly. "Unless, perhaps, you were working with Ryder all along." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face at the implication. "That's not what I—" "No further questions for this witness, Your Honor," Blackburn interrupted, returning to his seat with an air of a man who had scored a decisive point. Judge Hollister studied Beatrice for a long moment. "You may step down, Miss Winslow." As she returned to her seat, legs trembling beneath her skirt, Beatrice caught Samuel's gaze. The concern in his eyes was for her, not himself, even as his own fate hung in the balance. The realization strengthened her resolve they would find a way through this together. The defense called one final witness, Sheriff Davis, who testified to Samuel's cooperation with law enforcement and his prompt reporting of the Stagecoach attack, where Beatrice was found. But under Blackburn's cross-examination, even Davis was forced to admit that he had no definitive proof of Samuel's innocence. As the trial moved toward conclusion, Crawford delivered a competent if uninspired closing argument emphasizing the circumstantial nature of the evidence against Samuel. Blackburn, in contrast, painted a compelling picture of a calculating criminal mastermind who had nearly escaped justice through careful planning and manipulation. Judge Hollister announced a recess to consider his verdict, as was customary in bench trials without juries. As Samuel was led from the courtroom, he managed to catch Beatrice's eye one last time, his expression conveying what words could not: gratitude, apology, and something deeper that made her heart race despite the dire circumstances. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Beatrice paced anxiously while Davis leaned against a wall, his expression troubled. "It doesn't look good," he admitted quietly. "Blackburn's done a thorough job of poisoning the well." "There has to be something we're missing," Beatrice insisted, mind racing through the testimony they'd heard. "That man Thorne, something about him seems familiar, but I can't place it." Davis straightened suddenly. "Thorne. I knew that name sounded familiar." Emmett Thorne was one of the men who worked briefly for Samuel about 6 months ago. Left suddenly, as I recall. Beatrice's heart leaped. Then he would know the layout of the ranch, could describe it convincingly even if he wasn't involved in any robberies. "And he'd have a grudge if Samuel let him go," Davis added, excitement building in his voice. "We need to get this information to the judge immediately." They were interrupted by the bailiff announcing that court would reconvene in 5 minutes. As they hurried back to their seats, Beatrice's mind continued to work feverishly, trying to piece together the connections that might save Samuel from unjust conviction. When Judge Hollister returned to the bench, his expression gave nothing away. Samuel was brought back in, standing tall despite the shackles that bound him. The courtroom fell silent, tension palpable as everyone awaited the verdict. "Before I render my decision," Hollister began, his voice grave, "I wish to address a matter that has come to my attention during the recess." Marshal Blackburn approached the bench. Blackburn complied, confidence still evident in his bearing. The judge leaned forward, speaking too quietly for the spectators to hear, but his expression grew increasingly stern as the conversation continued. Finally, he straightened and addressed the courtroom. "It has been brought to my attention that key evidence in this case may have been misrepresented," Hollister announced. "Specifically, the testimony of Emmett Thorne requires further scrutiny in light of his previous employment at the defendant's ranch, a fact not disclosed to this court." Murmurs swept through the room. Blackburn's face flushed with anger, but he remained silent as the judge continued. "Additionally, telegrams received during our recess indicate discrepancies in the timeline of Mr. Thorne's supposed capture, and the most recent Stagecoach robbery, the one in which Miss Winslow was injured." Hollister's gaze swept the courtroom, settling briefly on Sheriff Davis with a slight nod of acknowledgement. "In light of these concerns, I am postponing judgment in this case pending a full investigation of Mr. Thorne's testimony and Marshal Blackburn's handling of evidence." Relief crashed through Beatrice in a dizzying wave. It wasn't an acquittal, but it was a crucial reprieve time to uncover the truth and expose the conspiracy against Samuel. The defendant will remain in custody, Hollister concluded, but will be transferred to the Snake River Jail under Sheriff Davis's supervision to ensure his safety during this investigation. Court is adjourned until 1 week from today. As Samuel was led from the courtroom, the relief in his expression was unmistakable. He managed to mouth "thank you" to Beatrice and Davis before disappearing through the side door, his stride lighter despite the shackles. Outside the courthouse, Davis explained what had happened during the recess. "I sent an urgent message to the telegraph office while you were testifying," he told Beatrice. "Ask them to confirm when Thorne was supposedly captured. Turns out he was already in custody in Laramie when your stagecoach was attacked. There's no way he could have participated or had inside knowledge of that robbery. So Blackburn coached him," Beatrice concluded, "gave him details to make his testimony more convincing." Davis nodded grimly. "And Judge Hollister doesn't take kindly to being manipulated. He's ordered an investigation into all of Blackburn's evidence, not just Thorne's testimony." "Will Samuel be safe in Snake River?" Beatrice asked, concern replacing some of her elation. "If Blackburn is desperate enough to fabricate evidence, I'll be personally responsible for his security," Davis assured her. "And I've already sent word to my deputy to prepare the jail. It's small but secure, and I'll have trusted men guarding it round the clock." The journey back to Snake River the following day was markedly different from their urgent trip to Cheyenne. Though Samuel traveled separately under guard, Beatrice felt hope blossoming for the first time since his arrest. The postponement of judgment and the scrutiny now focused on Blackburn's evidence created a path toward justice that had seemed impossible just days before. Rosa was waiting at the ranch when Beatrice arrived, her expression anxious until she heard the news. "Gracias a Dios," the housekeeper breathed, crossing herself. "But we must continue to pray. The battle is not won yet." "No," Beatrice agreed, "but we've gained valuable time. And now that Samuel's being held in Snake River, we can visit him, help prepare his defense properly." That evening, Beatrice rode into town with Rosa, determination driving them forward despite their exhaustion. The Snake River Jail was a small brick building adjacent to the sheriff's office, with just 4 cells for the town's infrequent lawbreakers. Davis greeted them at the door, his expression grave but not unwelcoming. "He's settled in," the sheriff informed them, "and I've arranged for better meals than he'd have gotten in Cheyenne. You can see him, but only for a few minutes. It's bending the rules, but after what you both did in Cheyenne, I figure you've earned it." Samuel was sitting on the narrow cot in his cell when they entered, a book open on his lap. He rose immediately, moving to the bars that separated them, his face lighting with genuine joy at the sight of them. "Rosa, Beatrice," he greeted warmly. "Davis told me what you did traveling to Cheyenne, questioning Thorne's testimony. I can't thank you enough." "It was Sheriff Davis who made the connection," Beatrice replied modestly. "We just refused to believe you could be guilty of such terrible crimes." Samuel's gaze held hers, intense and full of unspoken emotion. "Your faith means more than you know." "Both of you," he added, including Rosa in his grateful look. The housekeeper stepped forward, passing a small package through the bars. "Food," she explained. "Not much, but better than jail cooking." Samuel accepted it with a smile. "Thank you, Rosa. You've always taken care of me, even when I make it difficult." "The ranch is fine," Rosa assured him, correctly guessing his concerns. "The cattle are healthy, the crops growing. Everything waits for your return." While Rosa updated Samuel on the state of his property, Beatrice observed him carefully. Despite the confinement, he looked better than he had in the Cheyenne courtroom rested, clean-shaven, his eyes clear and alert. The local jail, while spare, was at least humane. When Rosa stepped away to speak with Davis, Samuel turned his full attention to Beatrice. "I heard Blackburn tried to implicate you as an accomplice," he said, voice low with concern. "I'm sorry you've been dragged into this mess." "I chose to stay and fight," Beatrice reminded him. "And I don't regret it." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling her. "Samuel, who would want your land badly enough to frame you for murder," his expression darkened. "There's a cattle consortium buying up ranches all through this territory. They've approached me 3 times with offers, each one higher than the last. The last man who refused them had a mysterious fire destroy his barn and half his grazing land." "You think Blackburn is working for them?" Beatrice asked, the pieces falling into place. Samuel nodded grimly. "It would explain his persistence. If I'm convicted, my land would be auctioned for a fraction of its worth. Easy for a well-funded consortium to acquire." "Then we need proof of the connection," Beatrice declared. "Something that ties Blackburn to this consortium." "It won't be easy to find," Samuel cautioned. "Men like that are careful to cover their tracks." "Perhaps," Beatrice agreed. "But they've already made mistakes. Thorne's impossible timeline, the rush to trial. If we keep looking, we'll find more." Samuel reached through the bars, his hand capturing hers. "Beatrice," he said softly, "you don't have to do this. Your teaching position begins soon. You could start your new life, leave this trouble behind." Beatrice tightened her grip on his hand. "My new life includes you, Samuel Ryder. I'm not going anywhere until you're free and your name is cleared." The wonder in his expression made her breath catch. "When this is over," he said, voice rough with emotion, "there are things I need to tell you, things I should have said before Blackburn arrived that night." "I'll be waiting to hear them," Beatrice promised, her heart racing at the implications of his words. Davis appeared at the door, signaling that their visit was ending. Samuel reluctantly released Beatrice's hand, his gaze holding hers until the last possible moment. "Be careful," he cautioned. "If Blackburn is working with this consortium, they won't give up easily." "Neither will we," Beatrice assured him. "Rest well, Samuel. We'll be back tomorrow." As she and Rosa rode back to the ranch under the light of a rising moon, Beatrice felt a curious mix of emotions: determination, hope, and a deepening affection for the man she'd left behind bars. Whatever lay ahead, she knew with absolute certainty that her future was irrevocably bound with his. The week that followed was one of intense activity. Beatrice divided her time between the ranch, where she helped Rosa maintain Samuel's property, and the town, where she worked closely with Sheriff Davis to investigate Blackburn's connections. They sent telegrams to contacts throughout the territory, seeking information about the cattle consortium Samuel had mentioned, and any links to the marshal. 4 days before the rescheduled trial, a breakthrough came in the form of a telegram from a banker in Laramie. He confirmed that a consortium called Western Grazing Investments had indeed been aggressively acquiring ranches throughout the region, often after the owners faced unexpected difficulties: fires, cattle disease, or legal troubles that forced sales at reduced prices. "This is it," Davis declared, excitement in his voice as he shared the telegram with Beatrice in his office. The banker also mentions that a law enforcement official is rumored to be on their payroll, though he doesn't name names. "We need more," Beatrice insisted. "A rumor won't be enough to convince Judge Hollister." Davis nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about Thorne. He's the weak link in Blackburn's chain. If we could get him to admit he was coached, that his testimony was fabricated." "How?" "He's in Blackburn's custody in Cheyenne." "Not anymore," Davis replied with a grim smile. Judge Hollister ordered him transferred to the territorial prison for his own safety after questions about his testimony arose. The warden there is an old friend of mine, might be willing to let us speak with him. Hope flared in Beatrice's chest. When can we leave? First light tomorrow, Davis decided. We'll take the morning train to Cheyenne, then arrange transport to the prison. If all goes well, we can be back before the trial resumes. That evening, Beatrice visited Samuel, sharing their progress and the plan to interview Thorne. He listened intently, pride evident in his expression as she outlined what they'd discovered. "You're remarkable," he said when she finished. "I've never known anyone with your determination." Beatrice smiled, warmth spreading through her at his praise. "I have good reason to be determined. An innocent man's freedom depends on it." Samuel's hand reached through the bars to cover hers where it rested on his cell door. "If when this is over," he said, his voice dropping to ensure privacy from the deputy standing guard, "would you consider staying, not just in Snake River but with me?" The question, simple yet profound, sent Beatrice's heart soaring. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "That's what I want more than anything." The joy that transformed his features was answer enough, but Samuel continued, words tumbling out as though he couldn't contain them any longer. "I know it's fast, that we've known each other only weeks, but I feel as though I've been waiting for you my whole life, Beatrice. When I found you in that wreckage, something inside me recognized you, as though my soul had been searching for yours." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes, emotion overwhelming her at the beauty of his words. "I felt it too," she confessed. "That day when you whispered the journey ends with me, it resonated in ways I couldn't understand then, but I do now." Their hands remained clasped through the bars, the contact a promise more binding than any formal engagement. "Be careful in Cheyenne," Samuel cautioned, concern tempering his joy. "Blackburn has powerful friends." "We will be," Beatrice assured him. "Davis is arranging for a deputy to accompany us for extra security." The journey to Cheyenne and the territorial prison proceeded as planned, though Beatrice felt tension building with each mile that brought them closer to their destination. The prison itself was an imposing stone structure on the outskirts of the city, its high walls and guard towers a stark reminder of the fate that might await Samuel if their mission failed. Warden Phillips, a gruff but fair-minded man, met them at the entrance. "Davis, you old fox," he greeted the sheriff with a firm handshake. "When I got your telegram, I could hardly believe it. Marshal Blackburn's been a thorn in my side for years." "Then you'll help us?" Davis asked, introducing Beatrice as a witness in Samuel's case. "I'll do better than that," Phillips replied, lowering his voice. "Thorne's been talking. Seems Blackburn's promises of leniency aren't holding water now that Judge Hollister's involved. The prisoner's worried he'll take the fall alone." Hope surged through Beatrice. "He's admitted to lying." "Not officially," Phillips cautioned. "But he's asking for guarantees of reduced sentencing in exchange for the full truth. I've arranged for you to speak with him privately. If you can get him to confess, I'll have my clerk ready to take an official statement." Emmett Thorne was a broken man when they entered the small interview room where he waited. Without Blackburn's coaching, his swagger had vanished, leaving behind a nervous, fidgeting figure whose eyes darted constantly toward the door as if expecting punishment for the conversation. "Mr. Thorne," Beatrice began gently, taking a seat across from him while Davis remained standing, "we're here to discuss your testimony against Samuel Ryder." Thorne's gaze skittered away from hers. "Said all I got to say in court. We know you lied," Beatrice stated flatly, changing tactics. "Records prove you were already in custody when the stagecoach I was traveling on was attacked. You couldn't have participated or had knowledge of it." Sweat beaded on Thorne's forehead. I don't know what you're talking about. Davis stepped forward. Blackburn's abandoned you, Thorne. Judge Hollister knows your testimony was fabricated. The only question now is whether you'll take the full punishment alone or share what you know about who's really behind the Stagecoach robberies. I want a deal, Thorne said after a long moment of internal struggle. Written guarantee of reduced sentencing. That depends on the value of your information, Davis replied evenly. But I can promise to advocate on your behalf with the judge if what you tell us helps convict the truly guilty parties. Thorne glanced nervously at the door again before leaning forward. It wasn't Ryder, he admitted in a low voice. Never was. I worked for him briefly, got fired when he caught me stealing supplies. When Blackburn approached me in jail with his offer, I saw a chance for revenge and a lighter sentence. Who is really behind the robberies? Beatrice pressed, heart racing with the confirmation of Samuel's innocence. Blackburn knows, Thorne replied. He's been protecting them from the start. That's why he was so desperate to pin it on Ryder to direct attention away from the real gang. And the cattle consortium? Davis asked. Western Grazing Investments, what's their connection? Thorne's expression shifted to one of genuine surprise. How'd you know about them? They're the ones paying Blackburn to look the other way and to help them acquire land they want. Ryder's ranch was top of their list. By the time they left the prison, they had Thorne's full confession, properly witnessed and notarized by the warden's clerk. The document detailed how Blackburn had coached him on what to say, promising freedom in exchange for convincing testimony against Samuel. More damning still, Thorne revealed that Blackburn had been on the payroll of Western Grazing Investments for over a year, using his position to pressure reluctant ranchers into selling. This should be enough, Davis declared as they boarded the train back to Snake River. Judge Hollister will throw out the case against Samuel and likely issue warrants for Blackburn and the consortium's directors. Beatrice felt lightheaded with relief, the strain of the past weeks finally catching up with her. I can hardly believe it's almost over. Thanks to you, Davis said sincerely. Your faith in Samuel never wavered. Not many would have fought so hard for a man they'd known such a short time. Some connections don't require years to form, Beatrice replied simply. From the moment he pulled me from that wreckage, I knew Samuel Ryder was a man worth fighting for. The return to Snake River brought an unexpected complication. As their train pulled into the station, they were met by Davis's deputy, his expression grave. Blackburn's here, he reported tersely. Arrived with 3 deputies this morning, demanding Ryder be turned over to him for immediate return to Cheyenne. When I refused without written orders from Judge Hollister, he threatened to take him by force. Davis's expression hardened. Where is he now? Holed up at the hotel, drinking and making threats. Says he'll return at sundown with or without proper authorization. And Samuel? Beatrice asked, fear clutching at her heart. Secure in his cell. I've got 4 armed men guarding the jail, but Blackburn's desperate, Sheriff. There's no telling what he might do. Davis checked his pocket watch. 3 hours until sundown, time enough to organize a proper defense and send word to Judge Hollister about Blackburn's actions. He turned to Beatrice. You should return to the ranch where it's safer. No, she replied firmly. My place is here. Samuel needs to know what we've learned, and I won't hide while he's in danger. The sheriff studied her for a moment, then nodded in acceptance of her decision. Very well, but stay close to the jail. If Blackburn's as desperate as it appears, he might target anyone he sees as a threat to his plans. At the jail, they found Samuel pacing his cell, tension evident in every line of his body. His face lit with relief at the sight of them. Thank God you're back safely, he said. Davis's deputy told me Blackburn's in town, threatening to take me by force. He's panicking, Davis explained, quickly outlining what they'd learned from Thorne. Your name will be cleared, Samuel, but we need to get through the next few hours safely. Beatrice moved to the cell door, reaching through to clasp Samuel's hand. It's almost over, she assured him. Thorne confessed everything, how Blackburn coached him, the connection to the cattle consortium, all of it. The hope that dawned in Samuel's eyes was beautiful to behold. You did it, he said softly, squeezing her hand. You saved me. We're not safe yet, Davis cautioned. I'm sending telegrams to Judge Hollister and the territorial governor, but it will take time for reinforcements to arrive. In the meantime, we need to prepare for Blackburn's return at sundown. The next hours passed in tense preparation. Davis organized the townsfolk, many of whom had grown increasingly skeptical of the charges against Samuel, as they witnessed Beatrice and Rosa's unwavering support. Men with rifles took up positions around the jail, while women prepared food and bandages in case the confrontation turned violent. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across Snake River's main street, Beatrice sat with Samuel in his cell, their hands linked through the bars. Davis had allowed her inside the secure area while he coordinated the town's defenses. I never thought I'd find this, Samuel said quietly, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on her palm. After losing so much in the war, after isolating myself on the ranch for so many years, I never imagined someone like you would enter my life. Beatrice smiled, emotion making her voice husky. Nor I you. I was resigned to a marriage of convenience, a life mapped out by others' expectations. She shook her head in wonder. How strange that a terrible event, that Stagecoach attack, would lead to the greatest happiness I've known. When this is over, Samuel promised, I'm going to court you properly. Take you to dinner at the hotel, escort you to the town social, bring you flowers from the meadow beyond the north pasture. I'd like that, Beatrice replied, imagining the simple joys of a life built together. Though I've grown rather fond of evenings on your porch, watching the sunset with coffee and conversation. Samuel's eyes crinkled with his smile. We'll have both. All the proper courting rituals and all the quiet moments at home. Our home, he added, the words a question and a promise. Our home, Beatrice echoed, sealing the commitment with a gentle squeeze of his hand. The moment was broken by shouting from the street. Davis appeared at the doorway to the cell block, rifle in hand. They're coming, he announced grimly. Blackburn and 5 men, all armed. I've counted at least 15 of our people in position, but I'd rather avoid bloodshed if possible. Samuel rose to his feet. Let me talk to him. This is between Blackburn and me. Not a chance, Davis refused flatly. You're staying secure until this is resolved. Please, Samuel insisted. If there's any way to prevent violence, to protect the people of this town, I need to try. Davis hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. From the doorway only, with armed men beside you, and at the first sign of trouble you come back inside. Understood? From the jailhouse doorway, flanked by Davis and 2 deputies, Samuel faced the approaching horsemen. Blackburn led the group, his face flushed with rage or alcohol, perhaps both. He reined his horse to a stop 20 yards from the jail, his hand hovering near his holstered pistol. Ryder, he called, voice carrying clearly in the tense silence that had fallen over the town. Time to face justice for your crimes. The only criminal here is you, Blackburn, Samuel replied evenly. We know about your deal with Western Grazing Investments. We know you fabricated evidence against me to help them seize my land. Blackburn's expression faltered momentarily before hardening into a mask of hatred. Lies won't save you, Ryder. I have the authority to take you back to Cheyenne, and I intend to use it. "You have no such authority," Davis countered, stepping forward. "Judge Hollister has been informed of your corruption. Thorne has confessed to perjury on your instructions. It's over, Blackburn." For a moment, it seemed the marshal might back down. His gaze swept the street, noting the armed townspeople positioned in windows and doorways, the unified front presented against him. Then his hand moved, drawing his pistol with practiced speed. "I won't leave empty-handed." Everything happened at once, Blackburn's gun rising, Davis shouting a warning, Samuel pushing Beatrice back toward the safety of the jail's interior. A shot rang out, but not from Blackburn's weapon. One of the townsmen, seeing the marshal draw, had fired first. The bullet struck Blackburn's shoulder, spinning him in his saddle. Chaos erupted as Blackburn's men reached for their weapons. More shots were fired, horses reared in panic, and people scattered for cover. Amidst the confusion, Blackburn spurred his wounded horse forward, charging toward the jail with murderous intent. "Samuel!" Beatrice screamed, watching in horror as Blackburn raised his pistol despite his injury, aiming directly at the man she loved. Davis's rifle cracked and Blackburn jerked backward, his shot going wide. He slumped in his saddle, then tumbled to the ground as his horse bolted past the jail. His men, seeing their leader fall and facing overwhelming opposition from the townspeople, quickly surrendered. The aftermath was a blur of activity, the wounded being tended to. Blackburn's men disarmed and secured in the very cells intended for transferring Samuel. Telegrams sent to Cheyenne reporting the confrontation. Blackburn himself had survived, though his wound was serious enough to require the town doctor's immediate attention. Through it all, Beatrice remained by Samuel's side, the nightmare of nearly losing him making her unwilling to let him out of her sight. When Judge Hollister's reply arrived by telegraph late that night, officially dismissing all charges against Samuel Ryder and ordering Blackburn's arrest for corruption and obstruction of justice, the relief was overwhelming. "It's really over," Beatrice whispered as Davis handed them the telegram. "You're free." Samuel's arms encircled her, drawing her close in their first proper embrace. "Thanks to you," he murmured against her hair. "Your faith saved me, Beatrice. Your courage and determination when others would have given up." Davis cleared his throat discreetly. "I'll just step outside, give you folks a moment." When they were alone, Samuel drew back slightly to look into Beatrice's eyes. "I meant what I said earlier," he told her, his voice rough with emotion. "About courting you properly, building a life together. But I find I don't want to wait to ask the most important question of all." Beatrice's heart raced as he took her hands in his. "Samuel, I love you, Beatrice Winslow. These weeks have shown me what truly matters in life, not land or cattle or success, but having someone to share it all with, someone who believes in you even when the evidence seems stacked against you." His blue eyes shone with vulnerability and hope. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of joy spilled down Beatrice's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she replied, the single word carrying all the certainty in her heart. "Yes, Samuel Ryder, I love you, and I want nothing more than to spend my life with you." His kiss was gentle at first, tentative with the newness of their declared feelings, then deepening with the passion that had been building between them since their first meeting. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, the future stretched before them like the vast Wyoming landscape, wild and beautiful, and theirs to shape together. 2 months later, on a perfect autumn day with the aspens turning gold in the distant hills, Beatrice Winslow became Beatrice Ryder in a ceremony attended by the entire population of Snake River. Sheriff Davis gave the bride away, while Rosa wept happy tears in the front row of the small church. Judge Hollister himself traveled from Cheyenne to perform the ceremony, his presence a public affirmation of Samuel's complete exoneration. After the wedding, life settled into a rhythm that suited them both perfectly. Beatrice taught at the Snake River School during the week, her natural talent for education making her beloved by students and parents alike. Weekends and evenings were spent at the ranch, where she and Samuel worked side by side to make the property flourish. Western grazing investments collapsed following the exposure of their criminal activities, its directors facing charges similar to those they had attempted to frame Samuel with. The Stagecoach robberies ceased entirely after the arrest of the actual gang, led by a former associate of Blackburn's who had been operating with the marshal's protection. As winter gave way to spring, and spring blossomed into summer, the ranch thrived under their joint care. Rosa, who had initially planned to retire to live with distant relatives once Samuel married, decided to stay on, her affection for the couple making the ranch feel more like family than employment. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues, Samuel wrapped his arm around Beatrice's shoulders, drawing her close against his side. "Happy?" he asked, though her contentment was evident in every aspect of her being. "Completely," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder, "though I have news that might make us happier still." Samuel turned to look at her, curiosity in his expression. "Oh," Beatrice took his hand and guided it to rest against her stomach, still flat but harboring their precious secret. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Samuel, next spring." The wonder that transformed his features was something Beatrice knew she would remember for the rest of her days. "A baby," he echoed, voice hushed with awe. "Our child." "The first of many, I hope," she said softly. "A family to fill this big house with laughter and love." Samuel gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying emotions too powerful for words. When he finally drew back, there were tears in his eyes. "When I found you in that stagecoach wreckage, I had no idea I was discovering my entire future," he said, voice rough with emotion. "When I whispered the journey ends with me, I never imagined how true those words would prove to be." "Not an ending," Beatrice corrected gently, her hand cradling his cheek. "A beginning, our beginning." As twilight deepened around them, and the first stars appeared in the vast Wyoming sky, Samuel and Beatrice Ryder remained entwined on the porch of the home they shared, their hearts full with the present joy and the promise of the future they would build together, a future born from the ashes of tragedy, forged in the fires of adversity, and destined to flourish in the fertile soil of their enduring love.